Welcome to the complete guide for the Sony ZV-E10 Mark II. We're going to cover literally everything you need to know about this camera in this video. I'm going to talk about a long-term review, my experience with this camera since the day I got it about a year ago. Get into the best settings for cinematic videos. After that, we'll take a look at all the best settings to get the most out of this camera if you want to take really good photos. Lastly, we'll cover how to customize everything in this camera to save some time and maximize your efficiency. I'll put links for everything that I reference in this video down in the description. All right, first section, let's talk about a long-term review and who this camera is really for. So I think that people who are looking at the Sony ZV-E10 Mark II fall into one of three situations. You're looking at getting your first camera, or maybe you're wanting to upgrade from the original ZV-E10, or you're looking at a B cam and wondering if this is a viable option. I've been using the ZV-E10 Mark II for about a year, alongside some more expensive options like the A7C Mark II, the A6700, and the ZV-E1. And this little camera is incredibly impressive and holds its own, but it does have a few flaws. Based on my experience with it, I'll share what's great about it, where it lacks, and after that, I'll share my opinion about those three situations and where this camera falls. Okay, here's what I like about the ZV-E10 Mark II. Number one, 10-bit color. This is the first thing that caught my eye when I got this camera, is that they put 10-bit color in it, which was something that I was used to from some of the more expensive Sony cameras. Like the previous model, the ZV-E10, only had 8-bit color. And simply with 10-bit color, you're just getting way more color options that will produce better gradients between color transitions. You'll get way less banding that can occur with 8-bit footage. Next, I like the color science a lot. Along with that really nice 10-bit color, I do think that the color science in this camera looks outstanding, and it's been very easy for me to color match with my other Sony cameras. And then when you look at just the overall image quality, the ZV-E10 Mark II shares the same 26 megapixel sensor with the wildly popular A6700 and FX30, which is a good thing. The video footage is sharp and looks outstanding. And that's such an important value, part of the equation here when you're looking at around that $1,000 price point for this camera. And the photos from that 26 megapixel sensor are also really high quality, and I like working with them a lot. For video in 4K, you're getting 24 and 30 frames per second. And also in 4K, you're getting 60 frames a second for that slow motion footage, and you get a hardly noticeable 10% crop in that 4K 60. It will also do 120 frames per second for even slower motion, but that'll be in 1080p instead of 4K. It's also limited to 8-bit color. That's almost useless in my opinion when you have a camera like this where, all things considered, I think 4K 60 in 10-bit color is a lot more ideal. Another thing I really like about the ZV-E10 Mark II is that it has S-Log3 and S-Cinetone, which is going to take full advantage of all of those quality and color video settings. I've been loving how good S-Log3 looks in this camera, and S-Cinetone is also nice to have for those shots where you want a good-looking image straight out of camera. Really, we got plenty of options to get excellent videos, whether you're brand new or want some pro features to grow into. Autofocus is a huge strength of this camera. Although it didn't get Sony's AI chip that kind of supercharges the autofocus in the E10 Mark II is fast, sticky, and accurate. I never worry about a shot being in focus. It's excellent. And then when it comes to audio, there's two things about this camera that I like. The first thing is the 3-capsule mic with directivity. Generally, I don't love internal mics on cameras, but these aren't bad, especially for who this camera is targeted towards, which is that vlogger, content creator type of shot. And it has settings for audio coming from the front, the back, and all around, or auto if you want to let the camera decide. But here's how the audio sounds coming out of the camera. It's a quick test on the internal microphones coming out of the Sony ZV-E10 Mark II. I do love that it has a digital hot shoe that allows you to connect a mic without any cables for 4-channel recording that can be really nice with some of the newer Sony microphones like this ECM M1. It maintains a product showcase setting where if you're making videos where you need to hold something up in front of your face, the camera will focus on it and then will toggle back to your face when the product is out of frame. It's actually pretty useful. I like that you can use one USB-C cable for live streaming and you're getting 4K 30, which is a really nice resolution for live streaming. Might have some overheating concerns, but we'll talk about that in a minute, and it won't be in the positives part of this video. In the positives though, we do have a full-size battery. The Sony NP-FZ battery is excellent, and it's nice that they're putting that in this entry-level camera. You get plenty of battery life. It's nice to see that this camera does have the updated menu system. The original didn't have the updated one, and that new menu system's been out for about 5 years since the Sony a7S III. It's just so much better than the old one. Has some beginner-friendly modes that are pretty useful and worth noting for those of you who are just starting out, like background defocus. You simply tap a button and you'll get that nice blurry background. The camera will do all the work for you to achieve that. Intelligent auto isn't something that I use all that often, but again, for the beginner, I think this is a really good mode, and Sony's auto mode is really quite good. It's going to give you the ability to start making great-looking videos right out of box. I know the grip isn't a huge deal, but I like the grip on this camera a lot, especially for being a compact camera. I prefer the depth of the grip on the ZV-E10 Mark II over other compact cameras like the ZV-E1 and the A7C Mark II. It's light years better than the original ZV-E10. But no camera is perfect. Here are a few things that I've learned over my time using this camera that do hold it back a bit. Let's get the biggest one out of the way first, and that's the overheating concerns. Although there are a lot of mixed results from other reviews about overheating, like the time frame and how long it takes the camera to overheat, due to it just being kind of a hard test in general, I'd be lying if I said that overheating wasn't an issue with this camera. In my tests in the studio, I was able to record for close to 2 hours in 4K 30 with no overheating warning. Other reviews had it overheating just past like the 1 hour, about the 1 hour and 30-minute mark. While live streaming in 4K 30, I had it overheat at about the 45-minute mark. And in warmer outdoor conditions, I would expect the overheating warnings and shutdowns to happen a lot faster than the results I just mentioned. I also wish the camera had more dials. I wish we had just like one more dial to map on the camera to aperture or shutter speed for faster, more intuitive adjustments. I think Sony might be putting way too much stock into the touchscreen on this camera, where you can actually change settings via touch, which is nice in theory. It is semi-useful, but I've noticed that touchscreen in general and tapping it is just a bit clunky. Speaking of that touchscreen, one thing that's nice about it is that you can tap to track focus, which is great. But if you go in and disable the shooting screen for those touchscreen changeable settings, which would be my preference, it actually completely disables and you lose the ability for touch tracking. It's a separate, different setting, and I think it's a bug that I hope Sony fixes soon. The buttons and overall materials of the camera are kind of plasticky and feel a little bit budget. It's not the worst thing, but they're not going to feel nearly as premium as some of the higher-end Sony camera models, and I absolutely don't trust this camera in rainy conditions. It also doesn't have a joystick. Having a joystick can be really nice for moving focus points, and I wish Sony had a way of including a joystick on these compact camera bodies. The screen in direct sunlight might be an issue for you. It's not the brightest screen, and it can be tough to see in direct sunlight, but I think that's another example of a sacrifice they have to make to keep the cost a bit lower. And then we get to another big letdown. Some of these other ones are kind of minor. This one's a little bit of a bigger letdown, and that's that the camera doesn't have in-camera image stabilization, which is pretty important for handheld video footage, making it look more stable and less jittery. It can also be good for photos being more sharp with some of those slower shutter speeds. And this camera doesn't have in-camera image stabilization. It does make up for it with a digital stabilization that does come at a cost of a 1.33 times crop, which is pretty significant if you want stable footage. This camera primarily being targeted at the vlog style shooter or content creator. I think this is a really important point. So I've got a 15mm lens, which is pretty wide, and it's actually 1mm wider than the 16 to 50mm optional kit lens that comes with the camera. And here is a vlog style shot, and here's what that looks like with no stabilization at all, right? So it's gonna be pretty shaky. And here's what it looks like with the digital stabilization turned on. It's a lot more smooth, but we also get a lot more punched in due to that 1.33 times crop. So to mitigate that crop, I'd suggest that you put a grip extension on your camera so that you can get a bit more reach and have a stable and wide enough frame for a shot like this. I'll put the grip extension that I like down in the description. All right, if you like how my videos look and you want your videos to look like mine, I'm actually gonna turn the LUT off. Ready? Turn the LUT off in 3, 2, 1. Right, that's how the video looks coming out of camera, but with it's called the Essential LUT. It's the one I use in the studios for these YouTube videos all the time. Turn that back on. We maintain really nice skin tones while adding a little bit of a blue punch into the mix. It's very subtle, and that Essential LUT comes with 4 other ones that do different but subtle looks. I'll put the link down below if you want to check those out. Enjoy. All right, with all that considered, who is this camera for? Let's talk about those 3 situations. The first one is maybe it's your first camera. Here's why this camera might be perfect for you. I think it's really ideal for the beginner to intermediate video creator, especially for that first camera or those looking to kind of like upgrade from maybe using their phone. It's perfect for YouTubers, solo vloggers, and educators shooting in controlled spaces like a home studio. I think it's fine for outdoor vlog shots as long as you get that grip extension to mitigate that crop during the digital stabilization. And even though the screen can be kind of tough to see when it's bright out, it's not like you can't see it, so it's absolutely usable in those sunny conditions. With excellent autofocus, decent onboard audio, 10-bit 4K video, and the insane amount of lenses in the Sony E-mount lens ecosystem, I think it makes for a really smart, future-proof investment for creators who want to grow over time and grow into some of those pro-level features that this camera absolutely has. For around that $1,000 price point for the ZV-E10 Mark II, I think it's an incredibly strong offering for your first camera. But here's a deal breaker or 2 to think about. If you need continuous recording for longer than an hour in the studio, or you're filming outdoor, long format content in hot weather, you're gonna have some overheating concerns. Also, if you need higher end photo capabilities, you're gonna wanna look at the Sony a6700 for around this price point. This camera, the E10 Mark II, is fine for things like thumbnails or simple photos, and the quality is actually really nice on the photos here. But yeah, the a6700 is worth a look if you need high-end photo capabilities. It's gonna be about $400 more than the E10 Mark II. Situation 2, maybe you're looking to upgrade from the original ZV-E10, and here's why the E10 Mark II might be perfect for you if that's the case. Simply, if you like your original E10, you're gonna love the upgrade here. It's better in almost every single way. Like video and photo quality, live streaming options, autofocus, everything. The only deal breaker that would be on my mind if I was looking to upgrade from the original ZV-E10 is that the E10 Mark II does overheat and the original just simply doesn't. So that's absolutely something that could be a deal breaker for you. In our third situation, for those of you looking to maybe add the ZV-E10 Mark II to your arsenal as a B cam, here's why it might be perfect for you. It's going to complement something like an A7 IV, an A7C II, an A6700 so well, where those are going to be like your go-to photo cameras that are also your primary video cameras because they're exceptional with video. And this E10 Mark II is going to make for such a nice vlog or B cam. From a deal breaker perspective, I don't really see any. Usually a B cam is for video and you're looking for a second angle to color match your other Sony camera, or maybe something more compact and simple that just simply complements your A cam. This one has been perfect for me for those exact situations. as long as those negatives we talked about earlier aren't like a huge deal for you. So that was my experience with using this Sony ZV-E10 Mark II for about a year. Next, I want to show you guys what is the absolute best way to set your camera up for cinematic videos. All the settings, literally everything. Here we go. We're running through the best cinematic video setup for the Sony ZV-E10 Mark II. We're going to look at how to get the highest video quality possible from 3 common types of shots in this tutorial. The ZV-E10 II is blowing up right now, and for good reason. To get that cinematic look that it's known for, we're going to have to get a few settings dialed in, and I'm going to show you what's working really well for me when it comes to this camera. Grab your camera and follow along and save this video so that you've got it handy for the next time that you might need it. We're going to be breaking this video down into 4 sections. First one is going to be the global settings. Next, we're going to take a look at all the settings you need to get like a locked off interview style talking headshot like you're looking at right now. After that, we'll look at the best settings for vlog style shots, and then we're going to end it with cinematic slow motion. Each section builds on the last, so by the end, you'll have a setup that works for almost any type of video that you want to make. For the global settings, we're going to dive into the camera menu, and I'll show you all of the settings that I change from the default settings that come out of box. Regardless of what type of shot that I'm doing, I don't change every setting in the camera from what it comes out of box defaulted to, so if I don't talk about it in this section and change it, it's because I just leave it how it came. As we go through this, on the left we have these icons that have their title up top. As an example, this camera icon is the shooting menu. I'll mention that as we go through, and then when I push to the right, we get into the actual settings in that container. Cool? Cool. First things first, make sure that you put your camera into video mode by flipping this little toggle up top into the video settings. Let's go to our shooting menu, this red icon. We're going to go to the image quality / recording, simply under file format here. These can be kind of confusing if it's your first time using a camera like this. First off, we're probably going to be using one of these 4K options. That's the highest resolution this camera can produce. And there's a few here. You have XAVC-HS, XAVC-S, and XAVC-SI, all those being the 4K. XAVC-SI is arguably the best video quality possible. It's also going to be large file sizes that are going to chew up your SD or computer space or hard drive space or whatever you're doing for storage. They're great, but they're massive files, and to be honest with you, I don't notice a huge difference between the two. You have XAVC-HS, which is still really high video quality. They're H.265 file type, so if you want to use that, make sure that your computer can actually decode, or your computer can use H.265 files. They're going to be a lot smaller than SI and nice video quality. Then you have XAVC-S, which is my preferred codec with this camera. XAVC-S 4K, video quality is plenty high. It's one of Sony's most common codecs that they use. I use it for almost all of my YouTube videos and even some client work, and the files are really nice to work with. So XAVC-S is my go-to, but you can make your decisions on which one makes the most sense for you. Okay, and then we're going to go to these movie settings here. In terms of record frame rate, we'll be talking a lot about this in our specific types of shots. I'm going to leave that one alone for now, but still in that same image quality and movie settings space, I'm going to go down to this record setting. Best rule of thumb here, your numbers might look a little bit different depending on what frame rate you have chosen, or if you chose maybe XAVC-HS or SI. Generally speaking, a good rule of thumb is that you want to make sure you're choosing the biggest numbers possible in this record setting. So in this case, I have an XAVC-S at 60 frames a second. In this case, for me, that happens to be 200 megs at 422 10-bit. So the biggest numbers, 200 is bigger than 150, and 10-bit is bigger than 8-bit. So with this camera, we have 10-bit color. We probably want to use that as much as we possibly can, but we'll break those down a bit further when we get to our common types of shots. Scrolling down here to lens compensation, shading comp and chromatic, I leave those both on auto. And then down here on breathing compensation, you're only going to have the ability to turn this on if you're using a native Sony lens. If you don't have a Sony lens, it's not going to show up as an option there for you. Breathing compensation compensation is going to give like a tiny crop, like 10%, which is next to nothing. And that's really just going to minimize. Sometimes when your camera is switching focal plane, it can have a little bit of pulsing on the sides, depending upon kind of the lens setup and a few other settings. I'll show you how to minimize that a little bit later, even if you don't have breathing compensation. What breathing compensation is going to do, it's going to crop in and completely eliminate any of that pulsing that might be happening on the edges of the frame. Okay, we're still in our shooting menu here. We're going to go to number 4, which is shooting mode. So in shooting mode, we'll go down to the shoot mode option here. And I suggest that you put your camera into manual exposure, switching it off of auto. I'm not going to fully go up there. It's going to stop my screen record, but that green icon up top is what your camera comes out of box in. We're going to scroll down and put our camera in manual mode. Manual is going to give you complete control over your shutter speed, aperture, ISO, all of which are pretty important to get the best video quality possible. Putting your camera in manual is also going to unlock all of the settings in the camera. If you're in auto, some of the settings we go through today might be grayed out. Speaking of auto, Sony did a great job with this mode. It will give you a nice image when you're first starting out, maybe a little bit intimidated by manual. Camera's going to make all of the white balance and exposure decisions for you. It will hold you back over time. You won't fully maximize your camera's potential, and I'm a firm believer that you can become an expert with manual while doing some practice shots and learning and making it as fast as auto, and your image quality is going to be a lot better, although there is a little bit of a learning curve there that's absolutely worth it. Moving down to number 6 here, audio recording. First off, make sure your audio recording is set to on so that your videos have audio. Second thing is this audio record level. You can change the camera's input gain here, and the goal, ideally you're as low as possible, but it's not a massive deal. But the goal here, most importantly, is that, you know, if you're using an external mic, I have the internal mic going right now, which is like decent. So that'll be a bit of a factor here, but in short, your goal with your internal camera audio levels is just increasing your gain or decreasing it depending, but changing your gain levels until you're in the audio record level right underneath that, those meters up there. The goal here is where your audio is peaking between -12 and -3. So I'm a little bit low right now. I'd probably come up to right about here. And now I have my audio levels kind of landing between -12 and -3. Moving down to wind noise reduction, I turn that setting completely off. I don't want the camera trying to digitally change my audio if it thinks there's wind and might mess the track up. It's not a huge deal, but I found that that's best when you turn that off. If you're in windy conditions and you're using the on-camera microphone, just use the provided dead cat windscreen and it does a pretty good job of cutting out your wind noise. And then you have microphone directivity. So let's explain these and then auto will make more sense. This is a cool little feature on this camera. Rear, that microphone is only going to be picking up what's behind it, right? So right now, like how I'm actually looking at the camera is perfect, but picking up what's behind it. All directions is omnidirectional, meaning it's picking up audio from 360 around the microphone. Then you have front. Good example there is maybe like a vlog style shot. You'd want the microphone to be trying to target only audio in the front and not picking up any background noise. You also have auto, where the camera is going to be guessing and making its own choices. I'd encourage you to choose the one that makes sense for the type of shot that you're doing. Next, we have shooting display. So just scrolling down here to number 10. Most important here is this emphasize record display. Just make sure that's set to on. That's how you get that nice red tally light around your frame. Number 12, shooting option, product showcase setting. So this one is great, and you should have it on if you're doing a very specific type of shot. Maybe you're holding up a product in front of your face and you want the camera to know that, and you want it to focus on the product before the product goes away and it refocuses back on the face, as opposed to it staying stuck on the face and the product being held up directly in front of your face wouldn't necessarily be in focus if that's the case. But if you're not doing that type of shot, turn this off. I have found that if you leave it on, it can mess up your focus sometimes, so make sure you turn that off if you're not doing that type of shot. Next, the cinematic vlog setting. Up to you. I keep this one off. All this really does, it just adds those black bars, those very cinematic black bars above and below your frame, which is cool, but you can easily do that in post. I'd rather have the full frame on my image, not have those black bars baked in. Okay, moving out of our shooting tab, let's go down to this a pinkish exposure and color tab. And number 1, exposure. Let's talk about ISO. So in short, I'm just going to take this lens cap off for a second. The lower your ISO number, the darker your image, and the higher your ISO number, the brighter your image. You might notice though, as you start to get into some of those like higher ISO numbers, let me go way up here real quick, those higher ISO numbers, that you're going to notice maybe some digital noise and some grain in your image, and maybe even some color shifting. Not so good. It definitely doesn't look that high quality. For me with this camera, I don't go much above 6400. That's even kind of pushing it for me. Much above that with this camera, I've noticed the image does start to fall apart a bit, get a little mushy, and maybe the colors look a little bit weird. So never above 6400 for me, which is a pretty big upgrade. The original ZV-E10, I never shot above 3200 because that same thing would happen. So the fact that we get a little more ISO space, in my opinion, before the image doesn't look great, is a nice feature with this camera. Moving down to number 5, color and tone, we have creative look. The camera has some baked-in creative looks, and they aren't bad. You might like some of them, but creating your own stylized footage is usually best done in post-production as opposed to baking that stuff onto your clips. Picture profile, a very hot topic. Picture profile, I'd encourage you to use PP11. This is going to be your S-Cinetone, and it's a really nice picture profile that does a great job with skin tones, as well as just has a cool feel to it. Doesn't require much editing or color changing in post-production, although you can, it doesn't require it, so it looks good straight out of camera. If you're just starting out, I would strongly encourage you to use S-Cinetone or your camera's picture profile number 11. Number 6, zebra display, my favorite setting in the whole camera. Zebra display, first thing, make sure you have your zebras turned on. This is going to show you via these zebras here when something in the frame is hitting a certain numerical value. And this is my preferred method of nailing my exposure systematically every single time. Zebra level, here's how you change that numerical value. I like using custom 1 or custom 2, it doesn't really matter. I think out of camera it says standard range. You can just push down on your wheel, and now we're going to get into my preferred, which is lower limit. And then you can change your numerical value for what value the zebras start to show up in the frame. But how do you know what level to set things to in the first place? This is the Ansel Adams exposure chart, and I'll put a free link down below if you want to download your own copy. But it's going to tell us numerically what things, almost anything that we're ever going to shoot, what it needs to be exposed to from a numerical value perspective, which sounds familiar, right? And yes, those numerical values match our zebra levels that we're setting and choosing depending upon what we're shooting perfectly. So for my skin tone, I would set my zebra levels to 70, right? My skin tone is 70 on the chart, so I would set my zebra levels to 70. And then for even a shot like you're looking at right now, I would just increase the ISO in my camera until zebras just barely start to show up on the brightest part of my face. I would then pull back by just 1 click of ISO, and that would be my exposure for this type of shot. Much more on zebras toward the end of this video. Moving down to our focus tab here. Let's go to number 1, AF/MF. Focus mode, just want to make sure that we're in continuous autofocus. Not messing around with manual, especially if you're just starting out. And let's go ahead, and I'll talk a lot about these two when we get to our common types of shots, but let's move down here to focus area. Okay, focus area, the camera comes out of box with a bunch of different settings here. Number 1 is wide. That's going to use the entire frame to find something to focus on, but we can narrow that down a bit, which can be quite helpful. We have zone, and once you click that, you can actually choose and limit the camera focus area to a very specific part. Right now, I just put that right in the middle. You can limit what parts of the frame it uses to get focus. Next, you have center fix, which is right in the center. And you have a spot, and you can kind of change the size of the spot, getting really refined or a little bit larger, this a little bit closer to zone. Once you click that, let's just choose large, and we can completely move around what exact part of the frame we want to get a little more precise. And let's say I clicked it right there. The camera's only going to try to utilize what's in that white box to get focus. Okay? And then we have expand spot, which is the exact same thing. The difference with expand spot is that it uses two spaces where that inner square, it prioritizes focus there. And then if it can't find exactly what it needs to there, it's going to use the slight expansion outside of that. One thing you can do with focus area limit, let me just get rid of, this is what I actually do. I get rid of center fix, I get rid of all of the spot ones, and I just have these three available, and I'm going to hit OK. Now, when I go to focus area, I just cycle through the three that I actually use. Wide, zone, and expand spot. Talk about these two when I get to the common types of shots, but for expand spot, I usually only use this for like a product or something. I need to be really precise on a very specific spot. But besides that, I'm almost 99% of the time in zone because I think it is the most common use case. Focus area color, you can change between what of that square, what color you want it to be. I just keep it in white. But then if we go back over to the left, let's go to number 3, subject recognition. I want to make sure that subject recognition in autofocus is turned on. That way it's looking for a specific thing in the frame to prioritize focus on. And then in terms of like, what are you actually telling the camera to try to recognize as a subject? You have recognition target here, and you have a few options. You have human, animal, and bird. Most of us will be just keeping that in human, and that way, when your camera, you set your specific type of focus mode you want to use. For me, that's usually zone. Then I'm going to tell it to prioritize when it sees, in this case, a human in the frame, to prioritize focus on that. Moving down to our green network tab here, we're going to scroll all the way down to number 8, network option, airplane mode. I usually keep this on, and it's going to help out with some battery life in the camera, so it's not always pushing Wi-Fi and Bluetooth signals. Having said that, I'll obviously turn it off if I do want to connect my camera to like my smartphone, which actually has a lot of benefit now. Didn't used to always be like that beneficial, but now you have Sony's monitor and control, Sony's M&C app that this camera does work with. Can be really nice as an external monitor, or you can also even change settings directly from that app. Moving into our setup tab, we're going to go to our power saving option down here. So power setting option, I want to make sure that this is set to this auto power off temp. You want to make sure that's set to high. That's going to help out. Your camera has an internal sensor. When the camera gets too warm, it tries to shut itself down to protect it. You're just changing what level that sensor is triggering at. For me, I have that at high. It's going to reduce the odds of your camera shutting down due to overheating. I've had Sony cameras for years. I know the warning you get when you turn that on is kind of scary. I've had Sony cameras for years. I've always set this to high, and I've never had any issues with my camera. I think the cameras are being a little bit overly safe there. And then number 13, under setup option, I'm going to go to record lamp and make sure that that is turned on. It's that little red tally light in front of your camera to make for certain that you know that you are, or usually the problem, you're not recording. Moving up to this main tab up here. It's really cool that Sony provided this in this camera. These are your most common, there's a few I disagree with, but generally speaking, these are just some quick shortcut, most common settings that you're going to need when you're making videos. First thing up here is record frame rate. We talked about that one earlier. Shutter speed, quick access to changing your shutter. We have aperture and our ISO. These are our big exposure ones here, as well as obviously frame rate, all of which I'll be talking about relatively heavily here coming up in just a second with all of our common types of shots. We also have quick access to changing our white balance here. Select LUT, LUT on, and flexible ISO. Those are all S-Log3 things. Okay, so if you want to shoot in S-Log3, when you click on flexible ISO, you can choose log shooting on and then make sure your color gamut is S-Gamut 3 Cine for S-Log3. I do have a lot of information on my channel about S-Log3. This is absolutely not going to be a huge tutorial on that, but this is how you kick your camera into S-Log3. Again, if you're just starting out, avoid this. Just use picture profile 11 for S-Cinetone and save yourself some. I love S-Log3, but save yourself a little early on headache when you're first learning your camera. LUT on is the display LUT, and then I've imported a LUT into my camera. another thing, how to do that, I also have on my channel. So a lot of information about LUTs and S-Log3 on the channel. Down here, file format, XAVCS 4K, all the codecs that we ran through earlier today. Record setting, again, just make sure that you're choosing all the biggest numbers possible with that to get the best quality. Proxy is not something that I use. Wind noise reduction, why they put that there, I'm not sure. That's not that common of a setting, but anyway, audio record level is a very common setting, and same exact screen that we looked at earlier today on number 2. We talked about that. Format, this is how you quickly edit or delete everything that's on your SD card if you were to execute that. File setting, you can just change if you want to. You can actually change your title settings on how the files come out of camera if you want to put like your initials or something. I usually just leave that one, and sometimes it's good to put the camera model for multiple cameras, but that's how you would change that. Shoot mode. We will be using actually this the shutter priority here in a second, but that's what we looked at earlier. Microphone directivity we looked at earlier. Steady shot we did not talk about earlier. Steady shot is your in-camera image stabilization. This camera does really good with active. It is going to crop in a little bit when you put your camera into active steady shot, but it's also going to be the most stable footage you can possibly get. Standard is decent. Not quite as good as active, but also next to no crop. I think there's no crop at all on that, so that's an option, but it's not quite as smooth as active. And then off is just completely off. Focus mode, making sure we're in autofocus continuous. Here's our focus areas we looked at. Here's our subject recognition that we looked at, as well as our subject target. All the things we looked at earlier, which is why I saved this menu for last. I wanted to go through in menu and look at those before we look at some of these shortcuts that Sony has already provided. Taking a look at our first common type of shot, we're looking at that locked off talking head interview style shot. Here's all the settings that I utilize in the ZV-E10 Mark II to get the best quality possible. First thing, when it comes to frame rate, up to you. 24 is the most traditional. I like 30. 100% up to you. They both have their benefits, but you'll be choosing one of these two when it comes to your frame rate for a talking head type of shot. Next is shutter speed. You want your shutter speed, right now I have 1/60. Yeah, you want your shutter speed to be double your frame rate. So for me, I'm shooting in 30 frames a second. I want my shutter speed to be at 1/60, that's 60 being double. And the reason for that is you want to maintain like a natural motion blur. If you crank that number up a lot higher, you're not going to get that motion blur. A bit of a preference thing. I guess it's all about how much you value your motion blur. For me, I always just follow that rule of thumb and keep things simple. Aperture for this type of shot, I probably want as much blur in the background as possible. This lens I have can go down to 1.4. The lower the f-stop, the more blur you'll get behind your subject. The higher the number, the less blur that you'll get. Image will also get a lot darker, but for me, I'm going to go as low as my lens will let me to get as much blur as I can in the background. When it comes to ISO, I'm just going to be using the right ISO to get the exposure via zebras that we talked about earlier. When it comes to white balance, this is something where in this shot like y'all are looking at right now, I know that my key light is 5600 Kelvin daylight balanced. So in camera, your camera is going to be in auto. This is not a setting I use outside of one very specific instance that we're going to actually happen to get into today. But if you scroll down to this C temp/filter, push to the right, you can change your camera's Kelvin value. My best advice for an interview style shot is to match your Kelvin value to the key light, the main light source that is lighting your subject, to match those same numbers there. Moving down here into our steady shot. For a locked off shot, meaning locked off, the camera's on a tripod, I'm just going to turn my steady shot off. I don't need that to be on at all. And then with our focus area, I love zone here, right? And I'm just going to, maybe the subject is off to the left, like the high left. I'm going to put it right there where the subject is going to be. It's going to be really helpful to make sure that the camera only sticks on right on my human subject using our subject target recognitions from earlier. It's going to focus on the eye really nice when it's in that setting, and it's going to reduce the odds that the camera tries to focus on something in the background or somebody maybe walking in front of the frame or something. It's going to reduce the odds that it grabs anything in focus besides what's in that focus area. And also a step further is when we go to making sure our subject recognition in AF is turned on and set to a human. It's going to make sure that in that zone box, it is prioritizing and absolutely sticking focus there. One thing to make our focus even more sticky that I do for a shot like this, back in our focus tab here under AF/MF, I would actually take my autofocus transition speed, bring that all the way down to 1. In my autofocus subject shift sensitivity, I'm going to bring that down to 1 locked on as well. So that's what those settings would look like for an interview. Reason for that, I want the focus in camera to grab that subject, and I don't want it to, I want it to be very sticky, locked onto that subject. I want the camera to have a hard time taking focus away from them. Trust me, it's still plenty fast to keep up with whatever's going on. Like a shot like this, there's not much that's going on in the focus. And the main camera y'all are watching is it's in the exact same settings that I just showed you guys here. So it's plenty fast, and that's going to make sure that your autofocus doesn't bounce around. And when you get it right, you'll get a high quality shot out of your ZV-E10 Mark II that looks something like this. There's going to be a lot of similarities to our vlog settings as our talking head. 1 or 2 pretty important differences. First off, with my autofocus transition speed and my subject shift sensitivities, I'm actually keeping those the exact same as I do for a interview style shot. Locked on for all the same reasons. For a vlog style shot, there's usually a lot going on in the background. I don't want the camera to try to too quickly grab focus on something else. I want it to try to stay sticky once it's got the right subject. So that's why I keep those there. Back to our main menu here. My record frame rate, again, 24 or 30, up to you. Same thing with shutter speed. If you value natural motion blur, you want that to be double your frame rate. And then when it comes to aperture and ISO, I'm going to come back to those. I actually let the camera do the work for me here. But one thing right below this while I'm here that I do change, oh, by the way, it's for a vlog shot for me. I'm still in XAVC S4K. Record setting, biggest numbers possible. Nothing has changed there. I'll do my audio to, like we learned earlier, I'll change my levels to make it make sense for the right audio levels, bouncing between -12 and -3. One thing I will change for white balance, this is the only situation that I put my camera in auto white balance. Usually when you're doing a vlog style shot, you're moving different lighting conditions, and I'm okay with the camera slowly shifting its colors and tones while it's in auto white balance as opposed to locking it off like we did for our interview style shot. Like I mentioned, I'm not going to change my f-stop or my ISO. I'm actually going to go down here to this shoot mode here, and I'm going to change this manual to what's called shutter priority. Okay, I'm going to click on shutter priority, and then with my ISO, okay, I'm actually going to be scrolling on my ISO. So the lowest ISO for this picture profile, yours might go actually a little bit lower. I'm in S-Log3, but I'm going to go one click past the lowest ISO possible, and now the camera's in auto. When we're in shutter priority, what the camera's going to be doing is, if you take a look at the f-stop, is at f4 and the ISO is at 800. It's not going to change the shutter speed. The shutter's at 1/60. And as the camera, forgot to have this really tethered up today. When the camera starts to get in different lighting situations, okay, it's going to be using the ISO and the aperture simultaneously. Okay, the ISO and the aperture simultaneously, to make sure that it maintains exposure. But how do you know like how bright or dark you want it to be, changing the ISO and the aperture? How bright or dark do you want it going? What I do, I actually don't use like the zebra method traditionally for like a vlog style shot. I want the camera to do all the work for me. So what I do, back in my menu under this exposure and color, we're going to go down here to number 2, exposure compensation, and then exposure compensation again. You can change this. I'm just going to put it right at 0.0. And now, right, the camera, when it's changing, if you look at the meter right to the left of the ISO there, it's at 0.0. Your camera is going to be using the f-stop, the aperture, and the ISO without changing the shutter at all, staying constant at 1/60. It's going to be changing the aperture and the ISO to make sure that the metering, which is the exposure compensation, is kept exactly at 0 or an even exposure across the entire frame. It's not perfect. I prefer using zebras when it comes to dialing in my exposure, but for a vlog style shot, as long as my audio is good and I'm in focus, I'm going to let the camera with the white balance and the exposure kind of be in this hybrid auto situation to get get as good of looking image as possible. One important thing though that I do change from our talking head style shot, back here under our main menu, I will actually take the camera and I'm going to put it into active steady shot. Vlog, we're out there walking, you know, we want the camera to have as much stability as possible, trying to get it as smooth as we can. That's why I put that in active. Again, it's going to crop a little bit on active. I think it's like 25% or something, so it's a relatively substantial crop when you put it in active. If you don't have a wide enough lens and it crops in too far on your face, you can use standard. For me, I have a wide enough lens where it works out pretty good. And when you get it right, your vlog style shots will look something like this, where even in a changing lighting situation like I'm in right now, your camera is going to be making a lot of exposure and white balance decisions for you. But if you want to keep your aperture numbers really low and get some blur in your background on a really bright situation like I'm in right now, you might want to pick up an ND filter, which is going to help keep those aperture numbers really low. If you want to master your Sony camera and feel like navigating it and accessing the right settings at the right time is on autopilot, so you can get sharp, great looking results every single time, check out my new Master Your Sony Camera in 5 Days course. That course is designed to walk you through everything involving exposure, deep dives into focus, everything regarding white balance, and much more. So if you're stuck in auto mode in your camera, or you want to get really confident with manual so you can get the maximum potential out of your camera, you want to check this course out. You'll get quizzes, practice shots, so that you can get repeatable results that boost your confidence in manual mode. Like Dave, who just finished the course, and here's what he said.
Sensed, because I knew you were a great teacher from your YouTube videos, that there would be some stuff that I didn't realize in there. I must have picked up about half a dozen things that were new to me that I could apply. So, and more important than all the sort of sexy things like phantom LUTs and log and all the rest of it, justified my decision, to invest in the course.
And he's so right. There's no LUT or color grade or anything that's going to outperform when you just simply nail the fundamentals in your camera. And that's exactly what this course is designed to do. It's the course that I wish I had when I was first starting out. Anyways, bonuses are going to be available for the next 20 enrollments. The link is down below. Now, when it comes to cinematic slow motion, our third common type of shot, a few things I do change. I'm actually going to show you guys the autofocus stuff first. So back over here, we've been here a lot today. This is the time for autofocus transition speed. I'm going to crank it. Autofocus subject shift sensitivity, I'm also going to crank it. Usually with something like you're slowing down, you might be whipping the camera fast or the subject is moving fast, both of which I now want the autofocus to be hyper responsive. So I'm going to be turning that on. What I'm also going to do when it comes to my focus area, I'm actually going to take that focus area and I'm going to use wide. I'm going to use wide and I'm going to touch the subject, like tap the back of the screen to track it, and it's going to track it across the entire frame, making sure that I keep things in focus. And I just cranked up the motors to make sure that they're keeping up with that fast moving subject. Other things I'll change, let's take a look at the main menu here. My record frame rate is going to go up to 60. Higher frames per second, I'll slow that down in post to get that nice high quality slow motion. Shutter speed's got to go up though. Shutter speed's got to go double the frame rate. So for me, that's going to be 1/125, while it's not perfectly double, but it's as close as we can get in this camera. 1/125 at a frame rate of 60p. F-stop, there's a lot of stylistic options here. I'll usually bring it up to around F4 for slow motion. Again, lighting and style choice of blur in the foreground or background are certainly a factor here. But I like F4, fast moving subject. F1.4, right, is a very thin margin of error. I have to get the focus just right. With F4, I have a little more forgiveness if I happen to misfocus a little bit for those kind of rapid fire moving subjects. And the other thing that I'll usually do, unless I have a gimbal or something, just like vlog, is I'm going to make sure that my steady shot is set in active. Even if that does the big crop, usually something slow motion, you can like move how far close you are, as opposed to like a vlog. If you're in active and it's too tight, you can't really like make your arm longer. But with like something slow motion, you usually have the ability to kind of move around a lot more. I encourage you to be in active if you can. And the combination of active plus the 4K slow motion. I'm also in this one, I'm going to be in XAVC S 4K again, big surprise. and then choosing the biggest numbers possible when it comes to our record setting. But all that combined, this camera is quite impressive when it comes to slow motion. And when you get it right, you'll get a shot that looks something like this. High quality, very smooth and buttery slow motion coming out of the Sony ZV-E10 II. All of the current camera gear that I use to make these YouTube videos, including what VND filter from earlier that I use, is in the description down below, along with the link to my brand new Master Your Sony Camera in 5 Days course. Just tap that little more button down there and you can see all of that. So that was everything that you need to know to get really good cinematic, high quality video out of your Sony ZV-E10 II, but it's also quite good for photography. Let's take a look at how to get the most out of your camera for photos. So you just got your Sony ZV-E10 II. You go to take your first photo and we've all been there. Let's get you all set up because this camera is producing some pretty impressive results. The first thing that's going to make the quality of your photos really good with this camera is going to be making sure that everything is nice and sharp and in focus. The first setting we're going to look at when it comes to focus, we're going to scroll down to this AM/MF tab. On number 1, we're going to go to focus mode. There's a few options here. I like keeping the camera in continuous autofocus. That just means that it's going to be whether the subject is getting further or closer to the camera or side to side, it's going to keep tracking it, as opposed to something like automatic focus where the camera is going to be guessing if it's going to be choosing between continuous or single shot, meaning once it's got its focus and then maybe the subject moves, it's not going to move the focal point until you refocus. I think for most people, keeping it in continuous autofocus is going to increase the odds of getting things in focus. And now because the camera's in continuous autofocus, we can utilize touch tracking really well. So down here at the very bottom, this yellow tab, I'm going to scroll to number 5, which is touch operation. Just make sure that touch operation is set to on. And now when you tap a subject on the back of the camera, it's going to track that subject for you to be able to focus on. And to get focus with this camera, all you have to do is just half hold the shutter button. That's going to tell it to grab focus. It'll turn green around what it's focusing on, and then you can snap your shot. Another interesting focus setting on this camera, on this first tab here, so the number 1 AF/MF, we're going to scroll to AF level for crossing. I think this comes out of box in standard. I changed this to lock on, and essentially what that means is that if you focus on a subject and a different subject crosses in front of them, that it's going to stay locked on to the original subject that you had in focus. Having it set on to something like standard or responsive just means that it might grab the subject that's crossing in front a little bit faster. When it's locked on, it's going to stay on that original subject for a lot longer. And still on this AF/MF tab here, we're going to go to number 2 on focus area. I'm going to select focus area, and this is going to be determining the actual focus area that the sensor is using to get focus. So when it's in wide, that just means it's using the entire screen to focus on something or to find a focal point. You can refine that a little bit. Like if I go to zone, I can just move what actual within that white box that the camera is utilizing to get focus. So it's only going to grab focus inside of that white box. We can also go to center, which is going to simply just focus on the center of the frame. You have this movable spot, and you can change that from huge to large to medium to small. And then once you select that, you can just move the focus point around to really dial in maybe exactly where you want something to focus. That same white box, in this case, just a little bit smaller. Expand spot is the same thing, except for you get 2 options here. When you get that center little square there, it's going to focus inside that, but you also get a little bit more range just slightly outside. That's probably one of my favorite settings, and all those are going to have their benefits. I'll talk a little bit deeper about what situations I might use different focus areas for in just a second. The next key setting to get the most out of your ZV-E10 II for high quality photos is going to be choosing between auto mode versus manual mode. So in the camera, under this first tab here, we're simply just going to have this shooting mode option. Down here under shoot mode, I'm under manual right now, but this is where you can actually change, and it's going to come out of box in what's called intelligent auto. I'll probably just refer to that as auto for the rest of today's video, but you have auto and then you have manual. Right here's what that M stands for. So there's a few pros and cons we need to talk about with this. The downside to using auto is that you might not get the exact photo that you want. It might be a little bit too dark or a little bit too bright, or it might not be perfectly sharp even if you get things in focus. That's not to say that you can't get really good images with an auto setting. I mean, this shot was taken in auto mode, but some of those downsides that we just talked about are certainly a factor when it comes to auto. The benefit to auto is pretty obvious in that you can pick it up and the camera is going to be making all the decisions for you. It's pretty user-friendly. You can just point and shoot and usually get a pretty good result. Most of what we talk about in today's video is going to benefit you even if you're shooting in auto, although you might notice that some of the menu options are going to be grayed out when you're in auto because those exact menu options are only unlocked when you're in manual. And I get it when you're first starting out about how valuable auto can be, but at some point I do encourage you to take off the training wheels and jump into manual. It's not as scary as you might think. And the benefit to being in manual mode is you have complete control over every single setting in the camera. I'll show you in a minute how I've customized a lot of buttons and dials on the camera to get the most efficiency when you're in manual mode. The camera is going to come defaulted. We're on this first tab here, this red one, and on number 1, image quality. The camera is going to come defaulted on this file format. It's going to be in JPEG. I switched this over to RAW, and the RAW file type that I choose is this lossless compressed option. A RAW file type is going to be a lot larger of a file size versus JPEG. The benefit to that, when you're in post, you're going to be able to push the exposure and the colors and the tones really far with the RAW photo without losing any quality or having it break down. With the JPEG image, when you get it into post and you try to push the colors or push the exposure, it's not going to have as much latitude to do that before the image starts to fall apart a little bit. A simple rule of thumb is if you're planning on editing your photos, I'd suggest using RAW. If you're not planning on editing them, JPEG usually works really good. Regardless of JPEG versus RAW, you're going to need to make sure that you get your exposure and your white balance right if you want them to look good, which we will talk about toward the end of the video. Editor Sean here. I just realized I forgot to mention, in this camera, you want to make sure that your aspect ratio is set to this setting, this 3:2 setting. I think it comes out of box in 16:9. And 16:9 is not going to allow you to use the entire sensor for your photos. It's going to just kind of crop the top and bottom in a little bit, but 3:2 using the entire sensor. So now you have more room to crop in post. Number 4, creative looks and picture profiles. First, when it comes to picture profiles, if you scroll down to this pinkish purple tab here, the exposure and color, and we're going to go down to color and tone number 6. And then if I go to picture profile, this is where we can choose different picture profiles in the camera. Picture profiles are typically used for video. I don't really know anybody who uses them for photography, but I have noticed a lot of you leaving comments on the channel about photography and whether or not you should use picture profiles. Generally speaking, I wouldn't recommend using picture profiles for photography. But when it comes to creative looks, that's a little bit of a different topic. So just going up one tab here for creative look, the camera's going to have a bunch of internal different creative looks that we can utilize. And look, like these can be helpful if you like one of the looks that the camera is being able to produce, whether it's some of those blue tones or those green tones or those black and white. One of the issues I think with that is that everybody has access to those same creative looks. If you really want to stylize your images, I can't emphasize this enough. I think you need to accept the challenge of getting good at editing and post-production with your photos. That flexibility is going to allow you to get the right look and the right feel for a different shot regardless of the scene instead of using these creative looks. I keep the camera in the standard creative look, which that just means no creative look. Quick settings for different types of shots. So I will provide this checklist. There's a free link down below. You can check this out if you want a quick guide here for the quick settings that I would recommend for a portrait or a landscape or a product or an action type of shot. But let's look at some quick rules of thumb when it comes to those and in-camera settings. So for a product style shot, I'm going to be at least f5.6 for the aperture. That's going to help ensure that almost everything of that product is going to be in focus. And when I say at least f5.6, that means I'll rarely be below 5.6 and usually even a little bit above that depending on the lighting, but at least f5.6. On that note, a ton of light is very helpful when it comes to getting a good product shot. And the ISO range that I'll be in for a product shot is usually 160 up to about 3200. That's about the max that I'll put this camera in to have a good quality. Much above that, I found we're introducing a little too much noise and kind of softening the image up a little bit. And I usually, for almost all my photos, don't go below 160 for ISO. It does go lower on this 100 number here, but I typically don't go below 160. Tend to like how that looks a lot, but a little bit of preference there. But for me, 160 to 3200 for the ISO to get the exposure that I need for that product. And then for my shutter speed, if I'm hand holding, I'll have that at least 1/100. It'll help me if I'm moving around a little bit so that it doesn't make it a blurry image. It's going to freeze it enough. So 1/100 if I'm handheld. If I'm locked off on a tripod, I'll let that go as 1/50, which will still help me maintain a nice and sharp image. And the focus type that I'll use for that product shot is going to be wide, so I'll keep the camera in wide and I'll just tap the back of the screen on the subject to get my focus. For a portrait style shot, I'm going to go as low on the f-stop as my lens allows. That's going to be what creates that nice blurry background and separation from the subject. Anywhere between 1.4 and f2.8 can be a good option, but typically just get that as low as your lens allows. And my ISO range is going to be the same for all these types of shots, which is going to be 160 up to about 3200, and we'll just be using that to get the right exposure. Same thing for portraits. If I'm handheld, at least 1/100 for my shutter speed, never lower than that. If I'm locked off on a tripod, I will use 1/50 so long as the person I'm taking a picture of isn't moving. And the focus type that I'll use for a portrait is going to be this expand spot. I'm just going to move that right on the subject's face, and then it's gonna override that and it's gonna be able to focus on their eye, which is what you want for a good portrait. For a landscape style shot, my aperture, I'll usually have that at least f8. I will go lower if it's like really low light, and because usually landscapes, you're shooting something that's pretty far away from the camera, like all the subjects are pretty far away. So even if you're at a lower aperture for like a lower light situation, even at 1.4, everything will still be in focus as long as it's pretty far away, but I will typically have that around f8 to make sure everything's in focus. Usually landscapes are pretty bright as well, so anything from f8 to going much higher to help darken the image if I need to can be really good. ISO range, you guessed it, 160 to 3200 depending upon the exposure that I need. My shutter will be the same as it's been. That shutter speed really does help to make sure that your images are nice and crisp and sharp, assuming that they're in focus. Focus mode for landscape, I'll typically be in wide. I'll tap the back of the screen on the subject of the shot, which for a landscape is usually just the horizon. Then I'll half hold the shutter button to get the focus and fire away. For an action style shot, things are going to be a little bit different here. The first thing is that my aperture, it's really going to depend. If I want a lot of separation off the background, kind of like a portrait shot, like a lot of blur, might put that really low, might have it a little bit higher to help me out with some of the exposure potentially, but that's going to be a pretty big range for an action style shot. To be safe, I might put it around f4, because I know that I'm not going to have, if it's down to like 1.4, I have to get my focus just right. F4 gives me a little bit more of a cushion to miss my focus like slightly and still have the right subject be in focus with still having a decent enough separation off the background at f4. ISO range, shutter speed is one of the biggest differences here. I'll never have, for an action style shot, usually things are moving pretty fast. I'll never have it below 1/250. That's going to help me really freeze motion. But that's really only going to be applicable for a subject that's moving at a similar speed that someone would walk. 1/250 will freeze that motion. I'll go to 1/500 if the subject's moving even quicker. And for even faster moving subjects like cars or like birds in flight, I'm going to go to like 1/2000, although it might even go as high as 1/4000 to make sure that I freeze the image and get a really sharp shot. I'm going to keep it in wide mode for the focus. I'm going to tap the subject to track it. It's going to be moving quickly, so that touch tracking is pretty valuable here. The other setting for an action shot, I'm going to go to this first tab here. We're going to scroll down to number 5 for drive mode. I want to put that in continuous shooting on high plus. That's going to give the camera the ability to grab rapid fire photos as fast as it can to capture a lot of shots. Then we got to go into editing and pick the best one. But either way, that's going to help us increase the odds of getting the perfect shot. So why did you get the ZV-E10 Mark II? Or why are you thinking about picking one up? It's a fantastic camera, but let me know in the comments down below, as well as any questions you might have. And while you're down there, give this video a tap on the thumbs up to let me know to keep making videos just like this one. Number 6, custom buttons. This is how you're really going to personalize your camera and make it really efficient. I'm going to show you how to map those, and then you can just copy all my settings if you want to set yours up just like mine. First thing, under the menu, we're going to go back down to the very bottom here, this yellow tab. Number 3, Operation Customize. There's 2 options here. This one's for video and this one's for photo. So the top one here, Custom Key Dial Settings. And now we have a bunch of tabs to be able to customize. I'll share with you. Again, you can just copy mine, but here's how you map them first. Yours are going to look a lot different when you get to this tab. I've changed all of mine. What's going to happen here, first off, it's going to highlight the actual button on the camera that you're going to be adjusting. So this first one here, in this case, it's the trash can on the camera. That's a customizable button. You can click it, and then you can scroll through the menu and choose the thing that you want to map that button to. Here's what I have mine mapped to. This is going to be focus standard. So for me, when I click that button, make sure I'm in a focus mode that actually makes a difference. Why this is valuable, I'm going to choose expand spot. So that expand spot is stuck right there. When I click my focus standard button, for me, I've mapped that to the trash can. I click that, and now I can move that around really quickly. Next, I have my zebra display select. That's going to turn my, we'll talk a lot about zebras in a second. That's going to turn my zebras on. That's an exposure tool that can be really helpful. That's just going to simply turn them on. And then when I tap left, that's going to allow me to choose the levels at which they show up. Number 4 here for white balance, I just toggle to the right on that wheel, and that brings up all of my white balance settings that I can toggle through. Next, when I push down on my wheel, that's going to bring up my focus area, and that allows me to toggle between the different focus settings that we talked about earlier. Next tab here, number 2, we'll talk about that first, the red button on the top of the camera. I think it comes out of box is like start movie recording. It's the last thing I want to bump when I'm taking photos, that it starts recording a video. So I just keep that as not set. And then my drive mode is my number 1, my C1 button, and that just allows me to change between single shooting or those continuous options, or like a self timer, just quick access to that. That being something I tend to toggle around pretty frequently with. This one here, if your lens has a customizable button, you can map something there. I have a variety of lenses that have customizable buttons and some that don't, so I just keep that as not set to eliminate any confusion. This is one of the biggest pieces for me, this 4th tab here, your wheels. I have my top one set to aperture and my actual wheel here set to ISO. So the actual, when I'm back in the camera here, when I spin that top wheel, that quickly changes my aperture, and when I spin this wheel down here that we just looked at, that's what's going to rapidly change my ISO. Those 2 things, when I'm in manual mode, being frequently adjusted, I have just some quick settings to be able to do that. Shutter speed, I can't map that. I chose not to map shutter speed to one of those dials. Nice thing with this camera is you can just tap the back of the screen on shutter and just automatically pull up the adjustments for that setting. Next piece of customization, if we just go under that same tab, we're going to go to function menu settings. Top brackets up here, this is for function menu. Down here is for video. Same thing, you would just click on it and map the thing that you want. I tend to have not a lot of options here. Like, I try to eliminate the noise, and because this camera has so many options on the touchscreen, I do have some redundancy. Some things that are able to be changed via touch on the screen, I have them hard mapped to certain buttons. kind of a preference thing there, but I tend to leave a lot of these as not set because I want to eliminate the noise of how many options are out there. So what that is, when I hit the function button on the actual camera, it pulls up those settings that we were just looking at. The blank squares are because it's not set. On here, I have my focus mode I can quickly change, although I typically almost always have this camera in continuous autofocus. My file format if I want to play around between RAW and JPEG, and then the target recognition, almost always on human, but you can change that between different type of animals as well. Interval shooting, that's what you want to use if you want to create time lapses. I have white balance here again because I tend to forget that I custom map that, so redundancy there. And then silent mode, the camera, when this is on and you take a picture, it doesn't have an actual mechanical shutter. The sound that you're hearing when you take a picture with this camera is just a little speaker that's making it sound like a shutter, but you can turn that speaker off if you're at like an event or something where you don't want to hear the camera. You can just set it to silent mode and then the camera's not going to make that sound. Number 7 is exposure and white balance. 99% of what's going to make your photos look good, assuming that it's in focus, which isn't an issue for you anymore, you sexy. That's going to come back to the photo being exposed well with proper white balance. Whether you're in manual or auto, we all know that having a photo that's way too bright or way too dark isn't going to be ideal. And that all just comes back to exposure. And although it isn't my favorite method to get your exposure, it can be relatively effective just to look at the back of the camera and see what the overall lighting and exposure looks like. But to do that, you have to actually be able to see your screen. One thing you can do to help with that, down here, back on this yellow tab, number 7, which is monitor. Under monitor brightness, you're going to change that to sunny weather from manual. It's going to brighten up the screen a lot and help you, especially when you're in sunny weather, be able to actually see what your exposure looks like. Screen on this camera isn't amazing, so you still might be challenged there, but it is going to help nonetheless. That sunny weather option is going to maybe drain your battery a tiny bit faster, but it's negligible, and I think it's completely worth it. There are way more reliable methods of getting exposure than looking at the back of the screen, but nonetheless, that can be, again, relatively effective. Next, when it comes to white balance, that's the colors and tones of your shot. That's a big one to make sure that you get right. Your camera is going to come out of box in this auto white balance setting, and that's fine. It does a pretty good job. If you take a bunch of photos in the exact same scene, what you might notice is that the white balance shifts a little bit from photo to photo, which can be a little bit annoying when you're trying to create consistency. One thing you can do to help that, I'm back in this customize settings option, so operation customize. We're going to map a button to a specific option. Let's just take the first one here, that trash can, just for the sake of conversation. We're going to map that. We're going to go to this color and tone. We're going to go to white balance. I'm going to go to auto white balance lock toggle. Now what's going to happen when your camera has to be in auto white balance to work, but you're going to let the camera get the white balance of the scene for 10 to 15 seconds. And then when you tap that trash can button, because we just mapped it there, you're going to see that auto white balance lock turn on. That just means that the white balance will not change at all until you untoggle it. And now the camera is constantly going to be trying to manipulate for the right white balance. But being able to lock that might help you a ton when you're trying to create consistency within the exact same scene, the exact same lighting conditions. If you change lighting or change scene at all, I would unlock that and just repeat that entire process. So although it's not the most high-end photography camera on the market, I do like the photos a lot that are coming out of the E10 Mark II. Now, to really supercharge your workflows with your camera and get ridiculously efficient, it's going to be about how do you customize your camera and use a setting that's called memory recall. Those two things are what we're going to cover in this next section. Enjoy. The Sony ZV-E10 Mark II is a really solid camera, but how the settings come out of box are kind of a mess. Let's speed things up for you with some thoughtful customization to some of the buttons and my favorite efficiency hack, memory recall. Nitro with the shot. Judge me. I know you were wondering. The first thing that we're going to do is put the camera in manual mode so that we can do all of these settings. I'm going to show you what works well for me for both video and photo when it comes to custom buttons. All right, the first thing we need to know about customizing these buttons is simply how to remap some of the buttons. So down here at the setup menu, this yellow menu, I'm going to go to this Operation Customize tab. I'm going to go to the right. We can do this for both photo, that's that icon there, and then for video down here, we're going to start in video today and we'll take a look at photo in just 1 second. So generally speaking, yours are going to look a lot different. Mine are all customized versus what they come out of box, but how to remap is you just click on the button that you want to remap, which right now, and you can look on the right side of that camera diagram, and what you can see there is it's actually just highlighting in orange the button that you're about to remap. Okay, so if I want to take this custom button 1 down here, in this case on the camera it's the trash can, when I click on that, I can go through the menu and I can choose almost any setting. They are a little bit different for different buttons, but almost any setting in the camera. Let's say I wanted to remap that to my cinematic vlog setting, I would just click on that and that would be done. So I don't want to do that. How I have this first one customized or mapped is under color and tone. Under white balance, I have it set for white balance. And the reason for that is when I click that, I can then go in and I can quickly access different white balance settings. At the end of this video, I'll talk a lot more about what all of these settings do, but let's just keep running through how I have them set up for maximum efficiency in our ZV-E10 II. Moving into number 2, we have the zebra display select is what I have set there. And what that does, simply speaking, is it's just toggling zebras. When I hit that, it's toggling zebras on or off. Zebras being my preferred exposure tool, I want quick access to that. And then the left press here on this wheel, I have that set to zebra level. So in conjunction with turning zebras on and off on the center dial, real close to that, if I push left on my wheel, then I have quick access to what levels am I setting these zebras at in the first place. All right, moving along. Number 4 on this right, I have that as not set. That is because down here, I have my wheel changed to ISO. So when I'm just changing my ISO, all I have to do is spin the wheel and that's going to change the ISO. Maybe I'm heavy-handed, but whenever I'm spinning that wheel, it's usually to the right to increase ISO. I always press down on that. So I don't want it to do anything and like start some kind of setting or function that I don't want it to do, which is why I have that at not set. Number 5, when I press down on the dial, I have that set to focus area. So real quickly, when I press down, I can quickly change between what focus area do I want to use for a different type of shot. Right now, I have that set in zone. And that actually brings me to the second point here. So the second tab, my top button, my C1 button, my custom 1 button, I have that set to focus standard. Why? Well, let's just say that, let's say I'm in zone. The first time that you click after going in focus area, you can move this around, but let's say that I wanted my focus area to be top center there, and then I wanted to change it really quickly. Well, I don't want to like go back into focus area, reselect zone, and then move it around. What I can do on my C1 button, that focus standard, I just click that and it automatically gives me ability to change that spot around. And number 2, that's just our red record button up top. I have that set to movie shooting. This one I have is not set. If you happen to have a lens that has a custom button on it, you can change that to something. I use a variety of lenses. Some have custom buttons, some don't, so I don't want to get used to having something there if I'm not always going to have it available. And then we get 2 dials on the E10 Mark II, which I wish we had more. 1 more dial would be amazing, but then we're pretty much the A6700 at that point. But this first one here, this top dial, I have that set to aperture. Usually yours is going to look something like this. I find that to be a little bit confusing, to be honest, so I just really just drop it straight down into aperture so that when I spin that dial up top, I'm just changing my aperture. I don't have my shutter speed set to anything because for video, usually my shutter is just locked off at twice the frame rate. 1/60 is twice the frame rate of 30 in this case, and I don't ever change that. So it's just for exposure in conjunction with zebras as my indicators. I have my f-stop and I have my ISO to change for exposure. And lastly, we already looked at this. I have my wheel set to ISO for just a quick adjustment to change my ISO to get the scene brighter or darker. And if you like how this video looks with these subtle blue tones while maintaining a natural skin tone, let me just turn it off. Ready? I'm going to turn it off. That is all thanks to my custom LUTs, which, let me turn the essential LUT back on in 3, 2, 1. The essential custom LUT is back on. You can pick them up with a link down below if you want to make your videos look like mine, and make sure you use this discount code if you want to save a little bit as well. And shifting over here to some of our photo custom buttons. Under this first one here, I'll just show you, you can have them follow the same things you had set for video, which I do think for this camera in particular is a good choice. But under Operation Customize, you can just see here, follow custom video icon. That just means it's going to follow the same things from video. For photo, a lot of these are going to be useful, right? So this bottom one here is changing your white balance that we had from our video settings. This is zebras on. I use zebras for exposure for both photo and video. Same thing, zebra levels. Not set because my ISO wheel for photo is the wheel is ISO just like I had it for video, and I don't want to hard press that and have it do something I don't want to. Pressing down is for my focus area. Up top here, I'm changing that focus standard, changing the focus point. This is one thing that I do change is I change the record button. I definitely don't want it to be like start movie recording. If I'm in photo mode, the last thing I want to do is like accidentally flip over to video with the wrong settings, so I don't want that. I changed that to drive mode. What that's going to do is when I click that, it's just going to put me in, do I want single, do I want to shoot in like burst, do I want to have a timer on or some kind of bracket settings. I just feel like, maybe it's just me, but it's like intuitive, is like that red record button when I'm in photo mode is like what speed of photo, what type of photos do you want to take? Does that make sense? Just me? Anyways, continuing through here, after that drive mode adjustment, when it comes to the lens option here, I'm all messed up. When it comes to the lens option, I have that custom button is not set for the exact same reasons. Although if you have just 1 or 2 lenses and they all have custom buttons, that might work well for like eye autofocus, or maybe like your subject recognition or something. So if I were to go here, go to autofocus, manual focus, subject recognition, I could see this being a good one is like, what kind of target do you want to hit? And like changing that one really quickly of like a person or an animal, depending what type of photos you take. And then I have these set the exact same. This is my wheel set to ISO, and I still have my dial up top set for aperture. I don't want to change them too much from what I had them in video. The only difference here is for photos, I will adjust my shutter speed a bit more. So that's something where I'll just like use the touchscreen of the camera and I'll tap the shutter and be able to change it quickly, knowing that my ISO and my aperture have the exact same buttons to change them that I had in video mode. So you can do memory recall for both photo and video mode. I'm going to show you how to do this in video, but if you want to do it in photo and video, just flip the toggle up top for video and photo and follow these steps. Memory recall, hands down, is one of my favorite efficiency hacks in these cameras. So what this is, let's go into the memory recall settings here. So under shooting mode, under our shooting tab here, number 4, shooting mode, you have camera set memory. And then you have these shoot modes here, which these work in conjunction. So when I'm in that shoot mode, when I click that, maybe you're in like manual and you push down to memory recall 1, you push to the right, and you have these 3 containers. Okay, so that's how you get to them. But camera set memory, when I click that, you also have these 3 containers. Let's talk about the differences. Here's what you want to do, is you want to set your camera up. Maybe you do 3 types of shot, maybe like a YouTube interview type of shot in the same studio every time. Maybe you have like an outdoor vlog shot with more like dynamic changes, and maybe you have like a slow motion. Those are the 3 that you do often, or whatever the 3 are for you. They're usually relatively similar settings in the camera, but there's always some changes. What you want to do is go to the camera and set everything up exactly how you want it for that first type of shot. You know, whether that be maybe you have like it's a slow motion shot, so you want your focus speeds to be really high. So you would go in and you would set up your camera to make sure that your focus speeds are really high. Maybe it's one where you're going to be wanting like auto white balance. I wouldn't if it was me, but maybe you want auto white balance. Maybe you don't want that zone focus mode. Maybe you want to have like a wide focus mode. Maybe what you want to be recording in is like 60 frames a second as opposed to 30. Maybe you want to be in XAVC SI for your codec. Anyways, go in and change everything that you want for that type of shot, your basic settings. You might change them a little bit once you're like in the field or getting your shot a little bit, but what's like the 85-90% of how you want things set? Once you do that in camera, get it exactly how you want, simply go into your menu here. You're going to go into this first one, not shoot mode, but camera set memory. You're going to click that and you're going to choose one of these 3 containers to register those settings to. Once you click it, I'm not going to do it because we just changed all that, but once you click it, it will say registered. And now when you go into shoot mode and you maybe drop below manual and into this memory recall and you choose that same container, it's going to only load up all of those settings as you had them registered previously. So 3 different types of shots. If you take the time to go in and register all those settings, and you can even see, for me, my number 1 is my interview type of shot, manual mode, 1/60. For me in this scene, I need f2.2 at an ISO of 800, 4K 30p, 422 10-bit, white balance at 5600. I have my S-Log3 conversion LUT on there. Number 2 is actually shutter priority. This is my vlog style shot where I have auto white balance on, I have auto ISO on, and that's just more of a dynamic scene. The number 3, my frames go to 60 frames a second, and my shutter speed is going to double that at 1/125. My focus speeds are different. Anyway, so you can kind of play with these containers and be able to save a tremendous amount of time when it comes between just simply clicking one of those if you registered them properly, as opposed to going in and changing everything every single time. Okay, so now that you've got your Sony ZV-E10 Mark II all set up for video, for photo, you got the efficiency hacks in the mix. I shoot everything for my YouTube videos in S-Log3, which looks like this once it's corrected. The ZV-E10 Mark II is quite capable with S-Log3, but if you want to see a complete guide for how to nail your footage using S-Log3, and it's not as hard as you might think, you want to check out this guide where I go into literally everything I know about how to nail S-Log3 footage. See you in the next video. Take care. See ya.